is the highest honor conferred by the American Academy of Optometry. It is named for Charles F. Prentice, the 19th century opticist, a term he coined, who was internationally renowned for developing the system of quantifying prism power that we now know as the prism diopter, and who, by charging for his refractive error determinations and overcoming the subsequent challenges mounted against that action, is now generally regarded to be the father of modern optometry. The video that follows will introduce you to this year's distinguished recipient of the Charles F. Prentice Medal, Dr. Brien Holden, who has made substantial contributions to our understanding of the mechanisms underlying development and treatment of myopia, evaluation of uncorrected refractive error, and the relationship between corneal physiology, contact lenses, and the metabolic and physiological factors that are required for maintaining integrity of the cornea. More importantly, in addition to his scientific and clinical research accomplishments, Dr. Holden has been able to develop a unique model for optometric research, engage collaboration with many colleagues worldwide, acquire massive amounts of research funding, and develop methods and procedures that are utilized by many investigators and clinicians throughout the world. In this view, Dr. Holden represents an exceptionally good role model and an ideal example of someone worthy of the recognition and honor associated with the Charles F. Prentice Award. Please watch the video.
Brien Holden has gone about research in a very, very different way. He has no peers. In research, he goes about it in a way that I don't think anybody else even gets near him. He has gathered a team of collaborators globally. And not only that, he makes his research applicable around the globe. So he's been able to get huge resources from these governments, from industry, and from national research councils.
His organisational abilities and getting things done, that is probably the most important, that he brought money to contact lens research and established contact lens research programs that were just unmatched and actually almost unthought of.
We just started doing research and development, science and technology, and we just followed our nose, so to speak, on what were the most interesting and relevant things at the time in vision care and vision correction. And that, for me, at the time, was contact lens research. And by following through on contact lens research, we end up today with an institute that has 6 centres around the world and 300 people working for it. And now we're spinning off 4 commercial companies to bring products to market. So it was never planned, it just happened.
Dr. Holden's approach to eye care delivery is pure science. Although it can be described as humanitarian in nature in many respects, it's through investigation and evaluation that he is developing effective eye care delivery models for the underserved. In my view, when you look at the body of research, his humanitarian efforts, his basic sciences, I believe that he is the most influential optometrist of my generation.
One of the rarest features in Brien that makes him very special is the way he combines enormous passion with high degree of compassion. There are very few individuals that I know in the world who have that combination.
He wants people to get better care, and he wants people to benefit from his research operations and his institutions that he's formed. He, unlike what most people see with him, which is usually a blustery sort of personality and a very blunt approach, he actually is a softie inside, and he really is strongly motivated to do well and to solve problems in the world.
It's the people that I work with and the people that we collaborate with that make this job fantastic.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Holden to the podium.
Well, I'm extremely honoured to be here to receive the Prentice Medal. The title of my talk is so long that I'm not going to read it. I won't have any time left. But I put the red asterisk there because I hated refractive error. As a student, which is better 1 or 2, the imprecision of it all, and yet I've spent the last 50 years and now the rest of my life in refractive error. So I'm going to take you on a 50-year journey, my research journey, and the first major event was I got married to the lovely Yvonne, jumped on a boat, went to London to go to the City University, which at the time was the centre of the known civilised world, and work with some fantastic academics as their student. Second major event was Ian Bailey. He's always an event, Ian. He said to me, why don't you do research? And I said something like, I was a shitty student. I was a lousy student. I failed high school and second year optometry completely. And Ian said something, Bailey, like, research is great, you should be up that like a rat up a drain pipe, or one of those Melbourne colloquialisms. So in 1966, there was a great research question for me, which is, can myopia be permanently altered by reshaping the cornea? And in fact, George Jessen said, yes, that's what you can do. You can make myopia go away. But there was a guy called Roy Rengstorff, and I could not find a picture of Roy Rengstorff. Roy took contact lenses off army personnel and followed their refractive changes for up to 3 months. And he said the cornea recovers. So I had 2 hypotheses going into my PhD. One, that corneal reshaping was not permanent, and to the question, why were the refractive changes twice as much as the K changes? I suggested that because the keratometric Myers did not read from inside the central part of the cornea, maybe that was the explanation. Well, I bought up every endoscopy lamp in the shop that sold endoscopy lamps. And I'm not sure what they did for all those small body part examinations for the next month or so in England, but I built myself a photokeratoscope on a principle that firstly, I could do better examination of the middle of the cornea, and secondly, something that Arthur Ho subsequently told me was insane, was to build the locus of objects that would give a flat image behind the cornea so I could accurately assess the distance through focus in the camera. 10 students fitted with 0.2 to 0.3 flat PMMA contact lenses, followed for 18 months. And in November 1970, I submitted my thesis to Robert Wheel, who said, what is this piece of junk? 2 books, 150 pages, either 5 PhDs or nothing. However, I did find after my 18 months of bending these pommy corneas that they did in fact lose their myopia. And when I took the lenses off, it took a long time for the corneas to recover, in fact 3 months. And indeed, the keratometric changes were half the refractive changes. And when I ray traced through my photokeratoscopic reconstruction of the cornea, I could accurately predict refractive change. There was another effect from this research. 3 of my 10 students were these folk who permanently were damaged and became academics: Jan Bergmanson, Judy Morris, and Dan O'Leary. So this is the view from the apartment that Ian Bailey and our family and their family lived in Belsize Square in London. And, you know, it's like Denver. Why would you live here? I mean, God, so bloody cold. So we went back to Australia, to a world of soft contact lenses, which of course were invented by Otto Wichterle. And when I started thinking about this presentation, I thought about what's been important to me. And it's really about giants and people I've collaborated with. What's a giant? Well, Sir Isaac Newton, who Arthur Ho doesn't rate, said that you can see further if you stand on the shoulder of giants. When I showed this to Yvonne, she said, "Isn't your mode of operation to stand on people?" I said, "No, darling, it's to stand on shoulders of people who know more than me so I can see further into the distance." And Otto was one of those people. What an amazing man, a great scientist, an incredible activist. More than once he picked me up at Prague airport on his way home from jail because he got regularly arrested by the government for speaking out in Czechoslovakia at the time. And on my travels as a PhD student, interacting with the guys at Berkeley, there were two giants of the time, Pulse and Mandel, that had done amazing work on physiology of the cornea. And they said, if you put 2% oxygen in front of the cornea for 2 hours, you don't get swelling. And between Otto's hydrogels philosophies and that results, it was assumed when hydrogels came to market that they provided enough oxygen to the cornea, they wouldn't affect the structure, including the endothelium, and they'd be safe for extended wear. Well, back in Melbourne, a couple of years later, Leo Carney and Ian Bailey with his Hello Sailor haircut, hello sailor, you can see him saying it, they actually published that after 5 hours wear of current soft lenses, there was significant edema produced by the cornea. And this was the third major event for me, the realization that you shouldn't believe anybody. You need to test for yourself. And the best way to do that is PhD students. And I'm proud to say that I've had 37 great PhD students I've supervised or co-supervised who through that period of time since 1981, when Steve the first one to finish, have done an amazing job. And altogether we've had 160 PhD students go through the institute and the school. The first two students were Steve Zantos and Lewis Williams. And Steve was looking at the slit lamp, through the slit lamp to a cornea, put a soft lens on, came in to me and said, "I've seen these black spots all over the corneal endothelium." We went to the slit lamp, they're gone. I said, "Steve, you know." He said, "No, wait." He put it back and 20 minutes later they came back again. And this was an amazing observation from a postgrad that shook a lot of people. Sai Mishima said in Japanese, "Bullshit." That's Japanese. There are shadows of epithelial events. They're not endothelial. And Ian Bailey and Bob Mandel said, "Go and talk to David Morris. He's the king of the cornea." And David Morris said, like all great people I've ever met, "This is very interesting. Chase it down." The generosity of spirit, sitting there for a day, talking to me about experiments. So I received a Fulbright scholarship and went on sabbatical with my wife and 3 kids to Berkeley, OSU, where Steve came, and Moorfields. And at OSU, met another giant, Dick Hill. What a great guy. We did our best work at OSU on BLEB research, and nothing was too much trouble for Dick. We had a big mess. I said, "Dick, it's a big mess." He said, "Gee whiz, Brian, we can always shut the door." He was just extremely generous of spirit. And during that period of time, I got invited to present my work in Switzerland at a cornea conference. And this guy, Naag Rao, was sitting in the corner. It's hard not to say in the cornea. He was sitting in the corner, and he had just delivered this paper about excessive polymegatism is bad for corneal grafts. And I went over to him, I was sitting in the corner on his own, I said, Narg, bloody great paper, mate. Do you know the cricket score? He said, I think we can be friends. And we have co-published 23 papers and been mates ever since. So they all said chase down BLEBs. And the beauty and the remarkable joy of working with adventurous and wonderful people like Unti shows in this particular story. There was a guy who was having his eye enucleated, and Auntie said, would you mind wearing a contact lens for a half an hour? We'll take some pictures. When we take your eye out, we'll do some examination of what happened. So this is the ultrastructure of a human eye, showing that the BLEBs were in fact swollen nuclei in cell margins. What causes BLEBs? 20 seconds. The only thing we could think of was carbon dioxide. The problem was that Irv had published that soft lenses are 20 times more permeable to CO2 than O2, so no CO2 builds up. So Lewis Williams said, I can fix that. Let's measure CO2 buildup. So we got a CO2 probe and found indeed that even after 10 minutes, a high CO2 buildup occurred in the epithelium. Problem was, it took us 3 years to get the paper published. It got rejected by 5 journals because they'd send it to Irv and say, bullshit, it doesn't happen. And that taught me never give up on such matters. The third thing that soft lenses are supposed to do is be safe. And we had a patient who had a serious microbial keratitis. Barry Weissman had subjects publishing early. And this young girl, age 19, sued myself and Steve and the university for a very bad abscess. So on the third part of the sabbatical, I thought I'll go and work with Monty Rubin. Now, Monty Rubin was a giant, still alive but not doing well. He was an optometrist, then an ophthalmologist, and then became very important. He tells me the story of a little old lady. He was examining her eyes when he was a medical practitioner, and he said, I've done your eyes and here's your prescription. And the lady said to him, can I pick out my glasses now? He said, no, I don't do that. I'm a medical practitioner. She said, don't mind, Sonny, when you've done the whole work, all of optometry, you'll be able to do the complete job. And that was Monty. He was direct, honest, great integrity, and he published infections with contact lenses. So all was not right with soft lenses. We had some serious questions to answer, and the 80s came upon us.
To Monty Rubin last night over dinner, prior to the 5 or 6 bottles of wine that we consumed, and I said to Monty, I am really pleased, and for those of you that don't know, Professor Rubin is a distinguished professor from the University of Houston and former director of the cornea research unit, contact lens research unit, and contact lens department at Moore today. It's wonderful that you've taken the trouble to be here. And he said, well, I know what it's like trying to put something together, and I can appreciate how long it's taken you to get to where you are now, and I wouldn't have missed this day for anything. And to him and to those other colleagues who have travelled from long distances, Ken Kenyon from Harvard University, and his colleague Judith Lockyer, Dick Pearson from City University, Nathan Efron all the way up from Melbourne University, Galipolo Rao from Rochester Eye Bank, Bjorn Wolfing from Sweden, Karolinska Institute, and last but not least my colleague Antti Vanas from Helsinki in Finland. I really appreciate the fact that you people took the trouble to come here to share with me this day that I'm really going to enjoy.
And they came from all over the place. All of those people were in Sydney in 1980 for a massively interesting and enjoyable attack on what we needed to know about contact lenses. And look at the stellar cast on the bottom row of people that joined us for that period of time. Well, this guy, George the Mertz, he was one of them, finished his work at Bausch & Lomb. He was the first guy to do an overnight corneal swelling study in a hotel in Rochester with 10 employees and a soot lamp, something you would not get away with today. But George organised this and found that the overnight corneal swelling response without a lens was 4%. So I said to George, let's run some soft lenses overnight and see what happens. And you can tell from this picture that George really loved me. I could tell he loved me because every time we went out for dinner, he was the only person who wanted to sit next to me. That's love. It's also a bit messy from time to time. But George, his love was strained to breaking point because we did the first 24 hours and I said, you know what, people say the cornea adapts. We've got to do this every night for those 10 subjects for the next 6 nights. He blew up into a George Mertz rage. He ran out the door. My 3-year-old son was in the office with me at the time. He went over and locked the door and said, George is angry. And he was. But we did 6 more nights with the magnificent help of John McNally. And of course, we published a paper that for 4% overnight corneal swelling, you need a critical oxygen permeability of 87, which was unattainable with hydrogels. The next major event was a biggie. There was a star called Klaus Nielsen, who had 26,000 extended wear patients. He wanted to tell me that if you fit loose, extended wear doesn't have problems. But we found he had quite a few infections. But I wanted to find the ultimate self-control study. Never been good at self-control, but I thought that this would be, cornea-wise, outstanding. So what Klaus did was find 27 patients who'd worn a lens in one eye only for 5 years. And we looked at the epithelial, stromal, and endothelial differences between the 2 eyes. A magnificent piece of work. And that publication has still remained the #1 cited publication. Nate helped us analyse the data and write it up. Antti drove the equipment all the way from Helsinki down to Gothenburg or Göteborg. And Debbie Sweeney ran the whole thing. The 90s were a decade of achievement. These 4 giants joined us with helping with programs, and of course, these collaborators you know very well. Ricky Franz introduced me to this man who was the originator of all silicon hydrogel lens technology that survives today. And all that money that Sieber's earned from patents and so forth is a result of this guy's genius, unsung hero in our industry, Adrian Hunter. And he put together a very good collaborative project. In many ways, the only decent contract we've ever had. And he put together about 80 scientists and professionals to chase down high oxygen permeable contact lenses. And as Des showed, compared with standard hydrogels, these lenses produce no more overnight edema than sleeping without a lens. Eric established that when you put a lens on of sufficient oxygen transmissibility, you don't get limbal hyperemia. But there was another problem we had to go back to, and that was inflammation and infection. And another unsung hero, Susan Brown-Scrobot, financed a $3 million project, which was a lot of money at that time, to look at inflammation with contact lenses. And it brought together Mark and Savitri, and we used Michel Guillon's technology that he'd set up for us when he was down with us. And one night, we ran an overnight study with contaminated contact lenses. Not on purpose. It was called the Inadvertent Overnight Contamination Study. But what happened was we got massive amounts of red eye responses. And from that work and from all the other work that was done by those people, we were able to define and deal with the inflammatory responses. And of course, that launched another giant, Mark Wilcox, who is my second most co-authored person after Debbie with 73 publications. We were still struggling to get rid of microbial keratitis, and sadly, silicon hydrogels did not do that. But Fiona and John Dart mounted the most incredible studies to evaluate the MK rate with silicon hydrogels. And in 2000, the next millennium, all hell broke loose with Nag Rao saying to me, "You've got to do something about this, you're an optometrist." And that brought in these giants into my world where I could stand on each one of their shoulders and see a hell of a lot further. And the story was blindness and vision impairment due to uncorrected refractive error was a big deal, not just in India, but it was a big deal in Melbourne as well. And mostly, we were concerned about children. And there are a series of refractive error studies run by Coven and Leon Elwine in Africa and around the world, where we looked at the rate of refractive error and uncorrected refractive error. And it was staggering. United States, China, and South Africa, just 3 examples of 60 to 80% uncorrected refractive error. This was our 4th most cited paper, but that wasn't the importance of it. The importance of it was, as the evidence grew, in just 6 short years, the World Health Organization, through Serge Reznikov, who actually ghosted this press release. This is secret information that nobody can tell anybody. But Serge ghosted this press release for the Assistant Director General to say uncorrected refractive error is the #1 cause of global vision impairment. Children fail at school, adults unable to work, people are pushed into poverty because we don't have enough optometrists, optical dispensers, and other people examining eyes and providing glasses. And we ran across, through Serge and NARG, Kevin Frick from Johns Hopkins, who helped us calculate and get published in WHO Bulletin that the cost to the world of uncorrected refractive error not being fixed was $200 billion a year. And we used that to get $70 million out of the Australian government to do refractive error work and other work in the Western Pacific. And this is very important, powerful information. And with Tim Frick, we were able to cost the fact with $28 billion we could eliminate the problem. But there was another problem, and that is people who had uncorrected near vision were not considered to have vision impairment because of the definition. And these folk put their shoulders to the wheel, and we published a paper on global visual impairment due to uncorrected refractive error, reporting 1 billion presbyopes in 2005, and more than half of the world's presbyopes did not have the glasses that they needed. And Nina published this paper showing that whether it's distance or near uncorrected refractive error, the effect on quality of life is the same. And we are now working through IAPB and through WHO to get the definition changed to include near uncorrected refractive error. So today, still 625 million people blind or vision impaired from uncorrected refractive error, and the research is focusing on effectiveness of what we know that we should be delivering. And the final event in this journey is back where I started on myopia. And of course, the rapid rise and prevalence of myopia has been written about, and we have calculated by the year 2050, half the world's population will be myopic, and there'll be 4 billion myopes. And the way we've learned to do these studies through Kevin Frick and others is to do these meta-analyses, in this case, scroll through 3,900 papers to get 134 and add it to the global data on populations and rates and so forth. So what we've got now is a situation where Australia and India are on the rise, where South and East Asia is already there, including the United States, 42% of the population with myopia. And South Korea and Taiwan are heading for the top of the table. South Korea, 97% of male recruits to the army were myopic. If you can't have a good optical business in Korea, where would you have a good optical business? But it's not just about the optical business. It's the worrying levels of high myopia at around 20%, and we expect by the year 2050, 400 million people will be highly myopic. And that brings with it the risks of increased blindness associated with increased risks of glaucoma and cataract, but especially retinal damage due to myopic macular degeneration. And in the study we're running in collaboration with Ming Wong He at the Zhongshan Ophthalmic Center, these data are frightening. 843 23-year-old mean age, minus 9.3 diopters. And by 55, every one of those people have retinal damage of some sort. Which of these two girls is minus 650? Hands up if you think it's the girl on the left. Well, you're right. Well done, Phil. What a long shot. One of these girls is minus 650 at 10. The other's minus 2. But look at this data. This is 350 low myopic eyes from one cohort and 350 highly myopic eyes from the other cohort. There are kids there, 5, 6, 7, who are already 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 diopters. Why do those kids head out there? Because I can tell you that half the parents of those red lines are not myopic. Macular degeneration, a major cause of permanent blindness. You wouldn't know it by looking at the National Eye Institute website. You cannot find myopic macular degeneration on the NEI website. And I said to the NEI lady, why is that? She said, we're American. I said, what's that got to do with it? She said, well, we don't have a lot of myopia in America. I said, but Susan Vitale from NEI published 42%. Oh, I better go look at that. The World Health Organization doesn't have myopic macular degeneration as a category because there's no defined category. It all goes into other. And the IAPB is working on it. But the number one cause of blindness in Japan, in people over 40, in the city of Tajima, is myopic macular degeneration. 26% of new blindness cases in Shanghai, myopic macular degeneration. And this is a wonderful paper for anybody interested in the area. Tien Wong has done a great macro analysis of the world's myopes and papers and all that sort of stuff, and he records that it's the number 1 to number 5 cause of blindness in all the countries around the world. So we're back at the challenge. Can we prevent or treat myopia? And at this meeting in 2001, 13 years ago, I gave a talk about Vision 2020, and I heard this guy, Earl Smith, talk. And after he sat down, I said, Earl, we are going after myopia. Will you join us? He said, I will. I said, no, you don't understand. It'll be your house, your car, your wife, all your PhD students and all your knowledge. He said, I'm in. I said, why are you in? He said, because I like the stuff you're doing in Africa, uncorrected refractive error. And secondly, if I don't get my ideas tested, I'll never know if they work. And it's been a tough collaboration, tough. But when he showed this data about visual feedback, summarizing obviously a lot of people's work, and the role of the peripheral retina, and the story came about that if you leave peripheral hyperopia when you correct myopes, which all of us do on a daily basis with standard contact lenses and spectacles, and when the parents say, the glasses are ruining my child's eyes, we all say, no, they're not, but we know they are. The fact of the matter is, we need to bring the peripheral image in to avoid that stimulus to myopia. And the best way to do it is with contact lenses, and these kids are really good at contact lenses, and you add into the periphery some plus, and when you look at the refractive error across the retina, and you put the peripheral plus lens on, it brings the image closer to the retina, eliminates peripheral hyperopia. This is a study we started in 2006, still going. These kids had a 40% reduction in the rate of progress of myopia in this study, and there are many people in this room and around the world who found similar results. When we looked at axial length, that's the rate of change of axial length for standard contact lenses. That was for peripheral plus contact lenses. So at 3.5 years, we decided to switch them, the other group, into the treatment lenses as well. What good is 40%? Noel Brennan presented a poster at BCLA, which I thought was very interesting, and we've recalculated it. This is Padmaja's data for 1,000 kids in China we've been following to look at the rate of progress of those children over those ages. If you reduce by 40%, many of these children will never reach 6 diopters. This fascinating paper from Wu says that if you take a bunch of children, and in this case there were 571 children, and you have a control group, myopic kids, and you put them outdoors for 80 minutes a day extra, the outdoor group has a 34% reduction in rate of progress of myopia over a year. If you look at the non-myopic kids, The number that becomes myopic in the non-outdoor group is 17%, and in the outdoor group is only 8%, halving the rate of progress or the rate of induction of myopia in those children. So what we're doing is an international consortium where we're going to throw a bunch of things in the control of myopia that are listed on that table, including myopia control specs, contact lenses, drugs, reduced near work, outside, monitoring, training with state-of-the-art software and game technology. This is a very important challenge to eye health, an enormous opportunity for optometry to be the leading agency in preventing blindness in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And it's important, more importantly, for the health and welfare of people throughout the world. I'm into my thanks, and I've got 14 seconds left. Firstly, thanks to our current researchers and the folks who helped me put this presentation together, particularly Monica and Dave Wilson. This is a great group of people. Thanks to the management group who run our 300 employees around the world and take care of business, science, technology, research, development, education, and public health. Thank you to our global advisors. These people are the top in their field. We believe we have the #1 IP lawyer in the world. He costs a fortune. But we need to make sure we take care of business. And these people are experts in their fields who give their time to us freely, except for the lawyer. And my family. I looked up an appropriate term for my family. My wife said, do not use a picture of the family. And I had a black square over her face, but I lost it. My family is my foundation stone. And I looked that up, and it's a beautiful term in Jewish mythology that describes a spiritual junction of heaven and earth. And I got a very earthy family and a very heavenly family. Thank you to the Academy for this incredible honour. When I was a young postgraduate student, all I wanted to be was a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and I took care of that in the early 70s. Then I wanted to be a diplomate. I became a diplomate. You are the spiritual home of optometry, and to get this award for being a scientist, for me, is unbelievable. But as was said in the video, it's a tribute to the giants whose shoulders I've stood on and the colleagues I've worked with. Thank you very much. Give us a hug, you big butt.
Thank you, Dr. Holden, for an exceptional presentation. What a round of applause. I think that shows the respect and honor that people convey onto you. We consider your participation in this awards program to be the highest honor for the Academy. And at this time, Dr. Bernie Dolan will present Dr. Holden with the Charles F. Prentice Medal. May I ask any previous Prentice medalists in the audience today to please stand and be recognized?